Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation. And today we're just doing our monthly Rush album chat where we do a deep dive on the various albums of Rush. And this month we are doing a deep dive on Rush, Snakes and Arrows. So today we have the guests in the panel. We've got Tim Durling from Tim's Vinyl Confessions. We've got Todd Evans from the Contrarians and Bill Schuster from the Contrarians. How's it going, guys?
Great. How you doing?
Great.
And fantastic. Okay, so what we're going to do is each of us will talk about our first impressions of the album, and then we'll choose 5 album tracks and just talk about what we like about it, do a bit of a deep dive, and we'll go round robin. So Snakes and Arrows came out in 2007. It was certified gold in Canada, went to number 3 in the charts. US, it went to number 3. And UK, it went to number 13. So it's the 19th studio recording. There are 13 album tracks, and it was produced by Rush and Nick Raskulnicks, who was very well renowned for doing works with the Foo Fighters, Deftones, and some various hard rock acts. So he had a bit of a hard rock pedigree. So, Tim, why don't we throw to you? Tell us about your first impressions of this album, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Peter. As a longtime Rush fan, it was just waiting for a new album, and the first track, which is also the first single, "Far Cry," was released a few weeks, maybe a month or so ahead of the album, and liked it right away. It started out, with Alex just hammering on an E chord, and then he goes into that magical F sharp suspended chord, which is the exact same chord that opens Hemispheres, and so automatically you're getting the warm fuzzies happening. But it's its own song, and it rocks. And got the album. As a matter of fact, I got a very strange version of this album. I don't know if any of you guys have it. This came in a little box, and this is actually called an MVI version of it. Music, I don't know what the MVI stands for. It was a very short-lived format. And so it has the album. You actually can't play this on a CD player. You have to play it in your PC. So it's got the album, and then it's got a documentary, which you can now see on YouTube about the making of the album, which I wish they would have done one of those for every album. But it gives you a real insight into the songs on here. But was very pleased with the album. I thought it was really strong, and just their post 2000s career in general. And then we got Vapor Trails. Some people don't like the Feedback covers EP. I don't mind it. This album, Snakes and Arrows, and then Clockwork Angels, and I've really been listening to a lot of all of those albums, and we could have just as easily not had that second act in Rush's career if Neil had decided to stay retired, which would have been his right. But they came back and they made some great music. This was the first time they worked with Nick Raskulnicks. I think it's a great production. And I just think the band sounds really vital on this album. And I liked the album right away. Eventually I needed to listen to it in my car. So I got the standard CD version of it. And eventually I found a vinyl version of it. But I've got no problem with this album at all.
Good stuff. Todd, what are your first impressions of this album?
Well, it's confession time for me. My first impressions of this album were not 100% positive. They certainly were not negative. But I had been going through a trajectory, is that a word? I think it is, in my Rush fandom, where I was increasingly disappointed, starting with Counterparts, with the lack of keyboards and orchestration. I always loved Rush. I loved Rush from the beginning, from the first album, second album, third album, all the way through the Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, and I always loved Rush for all the different directions that they went. But I started feeling like once I heard songs like Marathon and Mission and Prime Mover and stuff like that, I got really inspired in a different way, like on a different level. And so when I felt them stripping back, I felt like they were taking tools out of their toolbox that I thought were important tools. So I really had to spend a lot of the decade of the 2000s wrapping my brain around these albums and trying to figure out how to connect with them. And quite honestly, in the past 5 years is when it's all happened. And now I have overwhelmingly positive feelings about Snakes and Arrows and the other albums that came that came in the latter half of their career. And partly because I think what happens is, in my opinion, what Rush tried to do is they tried to replace the orchestration of the synthesizers with different textures in the vocals and in the guitars. So like on Vapor Trails, you can kind of feel like it's layers and layers of Alex's guitars with a lot of effects and some harmonics, to the point where it kind of fools you into thinking that there are some keyboards or there is some Mellotron or something, because the mix is so dense. And then I feel like on Snakes and Arrows, it's a combination of the layers of guitars and then the acoustic guitars on top of it. And when we talk about the songs, I'll explain this a little more, but there are some songs that really make you feel like there's some orchestration going on in there, even though it's just Alex. So I think if you think of Snakes and Arrows as just like a really high level Alex Lifeson performance, that's when it opens up. And that's when I made my peace with it. And that's when I discovered that when I started celebrating Alex Lifeson, I understood what he was doing, and I felt differently about the album.
No, well said. And we should always celebrate Alex. I think his work is
right.
extremely stellar. And I've always said that he's one of the most underrated guitarists in rock, but more about that. Bill, welcome to the channel. Mate, what have you got for us?
Well, I could kind of flip what Todd said. I'm just the opposite with the way I came around to this period. It took me a long time to grow to love the keyboard era that Todd loved to begin with. And I've had the same experience. It's just been in the past few years that I've come to love that era. The modern era, though, Counterparts through Clockwork Angels, I've loved every album right from the get-go. There's something about Rush, not as a prog rock band or a hard rock band or any other term you might put on them. I just like them as a modern rock band, just a good, solid modern rock band. Nothing fancy, just them being who they are, playing what they want to play. And I think there's a lot of that on Snakes and Arrows. And I also agree with what Todd said about Alex and his guitar. Especially, I love the amount of acoustic guitar he plays on here. It adds so much colored things. My initial experience with the album, I got off work at 11 p.m. I drove straight across town to Walmart, walked right into the electronics section, and there was a box. They hadn't been put out yet. They were due to be released the next day, and I slipped one out of the box and took it up and paid for it, took it out, popped it right in the CD player, and I've loved it ever since. It's the lyrical themes hit me first. I can relate to so many of these lyrics. It's some of my favorite Neil lyrics. And it was only later that I really started looking deeper into the musical layers and coming to appreciate that aspect. And I think I've had a lot more of that the last week, really doing another deep dive into this album and listening to it a number of times. And I think it's actually knocked out Counterparts as my number one Rush album at this point. I absolutely think this is my current favorite Rush album.
Oh, good stuff. Well, I guess my experience with this album, I had Presto on vinyl, and then there was a long stint that I just didn't listen to Rush. I wouldn't say I fell out of love with Rush, but I was just getting into other genres. I was following up down different rabbit holes. So I think I was in a department store and they had one of those cheapy bins where you had all these CDs for $10, and I saw Snakes and Arrows for $10, and I picked it up and I thought, haven't heard a Rush album in a long time. Played it, and the first song that just jumps out of the speakers is Far Cry, and I thought, wow, where have I been all this time? And I just listened to, the whole album, and I've been in love with Rush ever since. So it was sort of like the resurrection for me in regards to Rush. It really sort of forced me to reinvest my time in that whole catalogue, and been there ever since. And another thing around that, the time, I think it was 2009, I was doing a tour with my wife. We went to Canada, and this song was played in heavy rotation on my iPod. So, you know, touring around Toronto and all the various places, Montreal, and thinking, I wonder if they ever played there or they walked there. It was sort of like added a little bit of flavor having Rush on the iPod and listening to this album while touring Canada. So anyway, one of my favorites. So Tim, why don't you hit me with your first pick off the album as a song and tell us why you like the song? We'll take it from there.
I've traveled through Canada listening to a lot of Rush too. Actually, you know what? I've never been that far in Canada, to be quite honest with you. The only time I've ever been to Toronto was to see Rush on the R30 tour in 2004. So one time I got to see them. Basically, I'm in the east of the country, but that's neither here nor there. Is this where we do our 5 favorite songs, or just pick one? And
we'll do 5.
Okay. One thing I didn't realize when I'm a big fan of Neil's lyrics, obviously, like we all are. It's an important aspect of what they do and what makes this band unique. And I still to this day don't have a lot of his books, and I really enjoy his books. I mean, Ghost Rider is just an incredible piece of work that anyone who just enjoys a compelling read can enjoy. You don't have to be a fan of the band at all. But and then I had Roadshow. So after Neil died, I said, I've got to get some more of his books. So one of the books I bought was his book, Traveling Music. And what I didn't realize, not buying that when it came out, is that Neil was giving the fans snippets of lyrical ideas to come with the next album, which ended up being Snakes and Arrows. Case in point, is the first song I'm going to mention is Working Them Angels. He, of course, as most people know, he would motorcycle around North America. And then when they toured Europe, he'd get on his bike in Europe, with a riding partner. And he had stopped somewhere. I don't know if it was a restaurant or a diner or something like that. And a lot of his lyrics were inspired by things that he observed or things that he heard people saying. And there was a couple that came in, and I can't put it as well as he put it, but basically, the woman was giving the man some grief because she felt he was driving a bit recklessly. And she kept saying to him, "You're working them angels overtime. You're working them angels overtime." And Neil just said, what a great lyric that would be. And then he got thinking about it. He said, I guess I have been too, because, he likes to drive fast. He likes to live, push things. And it's just a great metaphor for pushing your limits. All my life, I've been working them angels overtime. I just think it's, just such a cool song. It's got cool dynamics in it. And Todd's right. I mean, there is a lot of layering that goes on, although there are some real honest to goodness keyboards on this album, one part in particular. And if somebody else doesn't get to it, I'll talk about the song that it's in. I think Todd knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, the first thing I'm going to mention is Working Them Angels. Far Cry is kind of obvious, but it is a great song. It's a truly great song. It's got a good message. I can get back on. It's a real positive message. Keep going, no matter what's going on. And it, to put it bluntly, it rocks. It's a great song. Band members are all at their top game on it. Next one I want to talk about is The Larger Bowl. And in the lyrics, it's the larger bowl, a pantuum, if I'm saying that right. And I didn't pay much attention to that. Rush song titles generally will throw you for a loop. So I didn't really look into it. I said, "Oh, what's a pantuum?" And it's a style of writing. I don't know if it's verse or what it refers to is you take the first verse and then that first verse becomes the second verse, or the second line in the next verse. And there's all of these repetitions where it kind of circles around again, and you realize your brain picks up on the fact that you're hearing the same lyrics, but you're hearing them in a different spot, and he's changing the meaning of them. It's basically, why such different fortunes and fates? Why do some people seem to have a good life and some people have such a hard life? And it's very melodic. It's got fantastic melody, and it's got Alex, in that latter part of his career, really, he was always great, but he really blossomed as an acoustic guitar player, an interweaving acoustic guitar. And actually, he gives credit on this album. He thanks David Gilmour for that, because apparently he went to see David Gilmour play in Toronto the previous year and talked to him backstage, and they talked about writing on acoustic guitar. So you could really hear a lot of those acoustics mixed in with the electrics, even on the heavier parts of the songs, like in Far Cry, for example. So that's 3. All right, I'll talk about it. Good News First. And Good News First, another great lyric from Neil. And he always says, don't give me the medicine first. Give me the ice cream, then the medicine. Give me the good news first. This song, for the first time since 1976, had Geddy playing a mellotron, which is, if you've ever heard John Paul Jones talk about a mellotron, it's a cumbersome instrument. It's got tape loops inside of it, but it's got a very, very distinctive sound. And the last time that this sound appeared on a Rush album was way back in 1976 on the song Tears, which their album designer Hugh Syme played the mellotron. So the strings, the keyboard sounds you hear are on a mellotron. Geddy plays mellotron on Good News First. Now, it's not way, way up in the mix. It's just kind of a texture. And it could almost, Geddy is using his vocals a lot to do sort of the, ooh. So you could almost be forgiven for not knowing that. I don't know if I would have picked up on it if it weren't for the documentary that was on this version of the album. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to take a bit of a left turn. This album actually has, for the very first time, 3 instrumentals. Rush are known for their great instrumentals. There happen to be 3 that plopped their way onto here. And they're all great in different ways, in their own ways. But I'm going to go with the second to last song on the album, Malignant Narcissism, which is a quick little, 2.5 minute rocking instrumental that started out with Geddy and Neil jamming. It started out with Geddy getting a bass sent to him, playing with it as he's recording his vocals, with Nick Raskulenis recording him through his vocal mic. And he just happened upon this little pattern. And then you could see it on the documentary. He's playing it. Then all of a sudden he hears it played back and he looks around. And basically Nick's like, that's a song. You got to make that into a song. So he and Neil came up with it on the spot. Alex wasn't there at the time. Neil's drum kit had been packed up. So there was just a basic 4-piece kit. You'd never know it to listen to it because Neil always makes the most out of whatever he's playing. But it was just a 4-piece kit. So he had, it was basically the rhythm section jamming out these parts. And Alex came back and found just the perfect guitar part to put over it. There's a spoken word section in the middle of it, which is from the movie Team America, World Police. And it actually mentions the song's title in it. It's a line from the movie. And, if you're a Geddy Lee enthusiast, as far as a bass player goes, he really shines on this track. All of the instrumentals are great on here, but that's my favorite, Malignant Narcissism. So yeah, Far Cry, Working Them Angels, Good News First, Larger Bowl, and Malignant Narcissism. And I didn't even get to, other songs that I think are just fantastic on here. So.
Well, we'll cover those as well. But I think it's great that Rush had 3 instrumentals and one of them got Grammy nominated. Malignant.
That's right.
Nominated. So, No, well said, Tim. Todd.
Okay, so the first song I want to talk about is Armor and Sword. When I first got the album, that was the one that really jumped out as the one that I knew I was going to like. It's a great example of Alex orchestrating with the layers of electric and acoustic guitars. I like that the song is heavy, but it's also kind of acoustic and light at the same time. It transitions in back and forth between different parts, has a very melodic chorus. And the chorus sounds like it has keyboards, but it doesn't. It's just Alex's little orchestra of guitars. And I've always thought Armor and Sword just really, I mean, Far Cry hits you really hard, but Armor and Sword really kind of keeps it going. The second song I want to talk about is Working Them Angels. Great intro. The beginning of the song sounds like classic Rush. It sounds like Hemispheres era Rush to me. And same as what I was talking about in the last song. The chorus sounds like it has keyboards, but it doesn't. There's a mandolin solo, or mandola, I think, is credited in the credits. And I think the only difference between that, I think a mandola is like a mandolin, like a viola is like a violin. I think that's right. But yeah, Working Them Angels is great. Fantastic lyric, absolutely fantastic lyric. Very relatable lyric. The third song I want to talk about is Spindrift. And first of all, Spindrift is just a great title. I mean, it's like I saw that title and I thought, oh wow, that's a great Rush song title. I'm surprised they haven't used it before. Great title. Really cool chord progression at the beginning that repeats throughout. That sounds kind of dangerous and a little bit wicked. It's kind of a scary sounding song at the beginning. It has an unusual structure to it. Spindrift does. It almost seems like the emphasis is on what seems to me to be a pre-chorus, which is the part where he says, "What am I supposed to say?" As opposed to the chorus, or at least what I think is the chorus, which comes up later, is where Geddy sings "A Little Closer to You." I'm not really sure which one of those is actually the chorus, or if it has two choruses or no choruses. But I like the way that song is structured. It's different. It's not the usual thing. I like that there's a rhythm. There's just basically a rhythm guitar part where a lead guitar solo would be. I think that's really cool. And I think it's Geddy's best vocal performance on the album. So I wanted to mention Spindrift. I like Spindrift a lot. The Way the Wind Blows is a song that I really like a lot. It's probably, out of all the songs, it probably has the most melodic chorus of all of them. When I first heard it, I was still stuck in my rut that young Todd was in, whereas every time I heard bluesy guitar, it kind of turned me off because I thought, oh, that's ordinary. I always wanted to hear guitar. I wanted it either always to sound like quirky new wave, or I wanted it to sound proggy, or I wanted it to sound metal. But whenever I heard bluesy guitar, I was like, oh, what is this? But the cool thing about The Way the Wind Blows is how it transitions from that to a really melodic song. And then it comes back into the bluesy part as well. And so more mature 50-something Todd really appreciates that, and really appreciates hearing Alex play in that style. But I think that the chorus of the song is probably the best use of those layered vocals that Geddy had started doing a couple albums back, or an album back, that a lot of people complain about the layered vocals. But I think in this song, I think it might be the best use of that. The acoustic break in the song is really nice, very well recorded. This whole album is very well recorded, and the acoustic guitar parts are very clean and very detailed. And I think it has a really nice ending. I think I like the way, I think it's very pretty, and I like the way Alex's guitars ring at the end. After the playing is stopped, you can hear the ringing of the guitars, and I think that's really nice and really beautiful. And then probably my favorite song, Faithless. And I think that those are Neil's best lyrics. They're excellent, and I think they're very brave. And I wanted to quote the first verse. He says, "I've got my own moral compass to steer by. A guiding star beats a spirit in the sky. And all the preaching voices, empty vessels ring so loud as they move along the crowd. Fools and thieves are well disguised in the temple and marketplace." And what that sounds to me is like Neil is, his BS meter's kind of going off when he hears people preaching and making a lot of noise and being judgmental. And then he goes on to say, "Like a stone in the river against the floods of spring, I will quietly resist," which I think is really elegant and really beautiful, because he's basically saying, that he's going to be respectful, but choose to opt out. And I just really like the way he puts it. It's very respectful and very kind. And so I think that's really moving. It's got a gorgeous string arrangement and a great guitar solo. Just a fantastic guitar solo. And I want to give honorable mention to Good News First because of the Mellotron. I just read today that that Geddy actually owns Oscar Peterson's Mellotron. Now, I only read that in one source, and so I don't know. Oscar Peterson is a great jazz pianist, and so I thought that was pretty cool. And the reason I wanted to mention Good News First is that for years and years and years, that was my least favorite song on the album. I didn't like it at all. And when I got the vinyl of the album, I don't know, it was probably like 4 or 5 months ago, I put on that song. And it just sounded really, really great on the vinyl. And so it made me appreciate it. And so over the past couple of months, Good News First has really crept up in the rankings. So it's at number 6 right now. But I like that song quite a lot. So I guess it's cheating. I picked 6, but
that's okay. We're going to talk about more. Don't you worry about that. No, well done. And it's really funny how people's favorite Rush songs evolve over time. Like my top 5 or top 10, it's always shifting.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's well done. And I've got to get that vinyl version of the album. I've only got the CD, so that's definitely on my wish list. So it's Father's Day tomorrow. Hello. Anyway, we'll see how we go. Bill.
All right. Yeah, I'm also in the market for that vinyl, but hoping for a good deal at some point. I don't want to take out a mortgage just to get a copy on vinyl. So,
it needs a reissue, is what it is.
Yes, I'm going to again echo some of what Todd was saying. I think my favorite section of the album is the section with The Way the Wind Blows, with the bridge of Hope into Faithless. I kind of see these as connected, just essentially a 3-part song. Lyrically, the themes in The Way the Wind Blows and Faithless are very related. And as Todd said, the bit about quietly resisting, just general background, as someone who has been an atheist since childhood and someone who is very far to the left politically to most of those in my surrounding area, I and my family tend to always be quietly resisting. And the lyrics on this album, and in particular some of those songs, really hit home for us. They get very emotional. It actually gives me hope. It actually makes me feel less outnumbered, less alone. And that's pretty powerful. That's amazing that Neil's lyrics are able to do that. But it's not just the lyrics, it's Geddy's delivery. I think that on these songs, as well as others, I think this is Geddy's peak vocal performance for me. The more I've thought about it, if I didn't know anything about the band, I would assume he wrote these lyrics and he was singing them from his own heart. So I don't think his modern vocals get near the credit that they deserve. And this was kind of before it really started getting the vocal loss, unfortunately. But yeah, it's great here. I have no problems with it at all. But the bluesy part at the beginning of The Way the Wind Blows, I didn't even really notice or think of that as a blues song when I first got the album until someone had pointed it out. I guess it just kind of, to me, it blended so seamlessly. And then I thought about it. I don't really like the blues in general. I don't mind it, but it's not one of my preferred genres. But yeah, I agree that transition from the bluesy guitar right into the rest of the song is awesome. And the blues actually fits the lyrical themes there. It's that sort of song lyrically. It's not a happy song. It's a bittersweet song in a way, but it's also empowering. Yeah, like a solitary pine on a bare wind blasted shore, we can only grow the way the wind blows. And it goes along with that. We'll quietly resist on Faithless. So yeah, that's those three. I really see them as one song essentially. So I guess I could really cheat there if I said that and go pick 4 others, but I won't do that. So We hold on. As someone who's been working a unrewarding factory job overnight for 2 decades now, lyrics like "Keep Going Until Dawn," this song is an anthem for me. It's again very inspirational. Got to get through, do what you got to do, and it amazes me that I would think in a previous era this song could have been a big rock radio anthem. Obviously, we were past that point in 2007, unfortunately for Rush, but it seems very just basic and relatable, very catchy, and just the lyrics I think anybody could really feel empowered by. I thought about speaking about Armor and Sword because that one's grown a lot on me, but I think Todd handled that eloquently, and I don't want to repeat too much of that. So I'm going to try to give a little love to Bravest Face. This and Good News First were the two that took the longest for me to really love them as much as the rest of the album. I never disliked them, but they seemed a little awkward musically and vocally at first. I don't know if that was just my problem with it or, yeah. I mean, do you guys see any vocal awkwardness or melodic awkwardness in those songs at all? Or no?
Not in those two.
No, maybe in some other ones, but I'll talk about that shortly.
Bravest Face. All right. Yeah, we might have Precious Little, but it's still precious. I mean, that is the song in a nutshell there. I feel like this entire album lyrically it's so interconnected, more so than most other Rush albums. It's as though Neil was writing a novella with different related chapters here. And I really appreciate that aspect. It's when I'm in the mood for this sort of thing, when I need to feel those things I was speaking about earlier, I can put this on from start to finish, and yeah, it's wonderful. This, just for a little side trip, this is my son's favorite Rush album also. He was 9 when it came out, and I'd asked him about it, and he gave me a good review. He sent me this morning saying he loves it more than ever. He talked about how great the production was and the playing and the lyrical themes as well. It's interesting to hear his views 15 years later, from 9 to a 24-year-old now. And it's great that he still loves this album. So, and my wife, same, we listened to it and she agrees about Geddy's performance too. So it's kind of a family love affair with this album at this point, which is pretty cool. Can't always get that sort of agreement with everyone on board. But, I think that's probably about it for the moment here. I'm curious to see which leftovers Peter might pick out here.
Well done. No, well said. It's wonderful to see how Rush inspires different people with different views. And, you know, this album is certainly, in my view, one of their stellar, efforts. Okay, so for me, my first choice is Far Cry. So you basically hear that first gnarly, infectious guitar riff. And to me, it was like Rush, this is a guitar-driven, heavy album. It's infectious as hell. It's full of intent. It's one of the truly great Rush opener tracks. And Rush have a great record of great opening tracks, and that's definitely up there. I even like the video. We'll talk about that maybe later, because there's some really good videos that came with this album. And as Tim, you said, it's got one of the greatest sustained guitar solos of all time, in my opinion. And that's the thing that I always think about this album. I think of Far Cry and that sustain. And you're sort of listening to it, and it's sort of slightly layered. So it's initial to sustain, and then there's another layer of a sustain, and you kind of see, I'm secretly willing it to last for, maybe another minute or two. but it's just and that's the solo. There's no technical sort of guitar noodling. It's just a sustain, and I think that's really brave and it's effective, and it makes the song truly memorable. And it's probably one of my favorite Rush tracks. The next one, Workin' Them Angels. I love the lyrics of this song. Tim and everyone else has, sort of mentioned that. And I don't think I've got too much to add in regards to that. Other than the time signature, the Rush are very good at changing time signatures. So it goes from a 3/4 to a 4/4. And I just love the different angular directions of this song. And throughout the whole album, you think that the song's going in this direction, then it'll go in this direction. And that's why I think Todd and I have discussed this previously, what I love about Rush, because it's just a wide palette. It's cinematic. And, you hear a Rush song and no Rush song sounds alike with a previous one. There might be snatches and reminiscences of previous songs, but they're all different. And it takes you on a journey, and it can go in various directions. But the lyrics, I love it. Workin' Them Angels, I think it's just a really great lyric. And my understanding was that he was inspired to write a lot of the lyrics of this album on his motorcycle journeys across America, looking at religious billboards, catchphrases and things like that. I mean, he's one of the great humanist lyricists. And, just reading the lyrics of this album is just at that level. And I've compared him to Dylan. And I think he's up there with the greats, but doesn't get the kudos because Rush are regarded as a genre band. And that's a whole different topic. But as a lyricist, it's just absolutely stellar. The Main Monkey Business. I like this. I think it's a tour de force instrumental. And to me, when I listen to this, I think it's moving pictures. It's going back to that era where they're just, having a jam, but a well-constructed jam. Apparently, Neil took 3 days to map out the drumming of this instrumental track. It was well planned. Again, very angular with the musical key changes. It's always surprising. And I like that sort of faint vocal chorus in the middle. It's kind of got that ethereal feel to it. But the riffage is just great. And I think it's holds up well if you compare it to the Moving Pictures era, where they did a lot of those instrumentals. And we get 3. So that makes it even better. My favorite song on the album after Far Cry is Faithless. I think this is a great song. So when you first listen to this song, you think it's sort of kind of familiar. It's going, the sort of standard sort of Rush instrumentation. But then when it gets into the chorus and it changes key, it sweeps you away emotionally. It goes into something completely different, and it's kind of devastating. So when, and I'm going to repeat what you said, Bill, when it goes into the lyrics, I've got my own moral compass to steer me by. And then you go, I don't have faith in faith. I don't believe in belief. You can call me faithless, but I still cling to hope, and I believe in love. That's emotionally devastating. There's just no words. And it's really where he, as a lyricist, is just pouring out his heart. He is at a point in his life that he's questioning, who am I? What is life? Where do I go from here? And there is some conjecture out there. Was he aware that he had a medical condition? Was he aware that maybe his life on planet Earth was limited? We don't know this. And is this a lot of the reason for the lyrics in this album being so deeply looking into the soul of the human condition, where he's questioning life? I don't know, because everything in the Rush time graph, I think, was before the personal tragedy and after the personal tragedy, because Rush were definitely in that final act a different band. With Vapor Trails onwards, that final act, the lyrics became deeper, the grooves became heavier. There was definitely a little bit of darkness, and, you know, you can totally understand it, because you read the story of what happened to Neil, and no human could sort of go through that sort of tragedy and not be, you know, unscarred. And a lot of it comes out in the lyrics. And I think Faithless is sort of indicative of that. I think it's the most devastating song on the album. It's the most emotionally affecting. And it's the one that sort of haunts me a lot when I listen to this. You know, from a musicology point of view, it's got the Alex, his guitar work is just wonderful. It's got the great outro, great tone. And, you know, Alex's guitar work across the whole album is just fantastic and to die for. But Faithless to me is, you know, probably arguably my favorite song on the album. And the last one, The Way the Wind Blows, it starts off with a tasty blues lick. Again, Alex in that tone, but then it switches into a hard rock groove where it's urgent and catchy. And then those all little interweaving acoustic diversions. And I know that he was encouraged by Dave Gilmour, Pink Floyd, as was said earlier, to write with an acoustic guitar, write your songs. And that's what he was doing with this particular album. He was writing a lot of the songs on acoustic guitar, and it comes and shines throughout this whole album. A great lyric in this song. Now it comes to this. It's like we're in the dark ages, from Middle East to Middle West. A world of superstition, like consider an unholy alliance. Now, this album came out in 2007. Let's think, what was happening in 2007? The world was in turmoil. Post September 11, lots of things happening in the world. Terrorism. A lot of the world events are sort of distilled in Neil's lyrics. So not only he was, you know, a lyricist about the human condition, but he was also a barometer of what was happening in the world. And there was so much uncertainty. And in that song about the way the wind blows, it's sort of like there's pessimism and it's sort of uncertainty. What the hell is happening? So it's a great time capsule for 2007, but it's timeless in the sense of where things are in, you know, in 2022, because I don't think this album has aged one bit musically or lyrically. So an honorable mention is We Hold On. And Bill, you were talking about Geddy's vocals. I think his vocals are fine, but on this particular track, I sort of detect a little bit of his vocals are a little bit fragile, and you can start to hear the aging process. I don't know what you guys' views are on this. I mean, he's, you know, it's a really stellar vocal performance throughout the whole album, but on this particular track, I found that his vocals were a little bit fragile. What do you guys think about that view? I
think that this like Bill was saying, this is the last album where his vocal performance is really exceptionally good. I think what's happening with Geddy's voice is it's totally not his fault, and he's just aging. And I noticed that I'm 58, and sometimes things just don't roll off the tongue like they used to. And you can sort of, like when you listen to R40 or watch that DVD, it's less about his range and more about his ability to enunciate like at a high volume for a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Longevity, like for a long time, like for 2 hours. And
yeah,
it is just totally not his fault. It's just going to happen.
I think you're nailing it. You're nailing it totally, Todd. My whole with Geddy, I always I think with Clockwork Angels, I think that they captured a really good vocal in studio. You know, I think Nick Raskulin has worked really hard. And what what happened with Geddy is different than a lot of aging rock vocalists, because usually what happens is they lose the top end of their range. And I'm thinking of people like Paul Stanley and David Coverdale and, my favorite singers, to be quite honest. But with Geddy, the problem wasn't the fact that he couldn't hit the high notes anymore. I found it to be a little what Todd was saying about the enunciation, but it's the control, the ability to hit the high note and then go back to where he's supposed to be and not have that wavering. And I noticed that a lot in his latter day live performances. His vocals would waver a lot. And there'd be times where some of them I just have to go, that was rough. But, to contrast that, I would still like to have seen some of those last tours, because as a bass player and a performer, he was never better. He was never one to move around the stage a lot until his latter years. And as a bass player, he just kept getting better and better and better and better. And, it's kind of one of those things where, people that don't like Rush typically don't like Rush because of Geddy's vocals. So they're not going to like what he sounds like. What are you talking about? He can't sing anymore. He never could. It's like, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking as a Rush fan. I can say it. You can't. But, I think he's got a lot of great vocal performances on this album. I think they captured, the essence of the songs really well. He's always been really, really good at interpreting Neil's lyrics. And if I was going to mention an honorable mention, which I don't think I did, I would have said The Way the Wind Blows. I always called this Rush Plays the Blues, but it's not, because like Peter said, it goes da 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 da, like it goes into the heavy, heavy verse. And it's so simple, but it's so effective. I love the line from the Middle East to the Middle West, because everybody talks about the Middle East, Iraq and Afghanistan. And when you say the Midwest, usually people are talking about the Midwestern United States, but no one ever calls it the Middle West. It's always the Midwest. But why? Why is it, why do we not say, well, there's trouble in the Mideast? Meanwhile, this guy's from the Middle West of America. Nobody says that, but I just thought the Middle East to the Middle West. He's a great observational lyricist too. And a song like talking about what's going on in the world, like The Way the Wind Blows in the verses, I mean, those lyrics wouldn't have sounded so out of place on Grace Under Pressure, which, a lot of that was Cold War influenced and unsettling. But Neil's always been a great, like you can totally, if you can listen to a lot of his lyrics, they are timeless. But if you weren't a Rush fan and you were to say, okay, well, when's this song from? And they were to tell you, well, it's from this time period. They'll go, and if they're really up on their history, they'll go, I bet I know what sparked the idea for this song. And I never really noticed it until Bill mentioned it. You could almost, more than any other Rush album, just take the lyrics to this album and read them as a book with chapters, no music. Not that they haven't had thematic albums before, certainly, but by the time you finish the lyrics to We Hold On, you really feel like you've taken a journey with these characters.
Absolutely. I think the lyrics are now, because what you were saying, Tim, is like you read some of the Rush lyrics and some of those albums, you can date it to a particular period, but you read the lyrics of this album and to me it's now, even though it was recorded in 2007.
They're not dated at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The production's not dated. I think it sounds nice and crisp.
No, it's not.
Came out last week. Yeah.
And when you've got a lyric, and I'm raving on about it, Faithless, that's a timeless lyric. And it's about the human condition. He's one of the great humanist lyricists, and he's just questioning things. So what do you think about that angle that I came, where he may have been, I don't know, do you think he was looking at his life, that his life wasn't infinite?
I've never heard that before, but I just tend to think it's like when you've been through what that man went through. And like I said, if any Rush fans reading this, if you're going to get one of Neil's books, get Ghost Rider. You'll cry. Sometimes you'll laugh. You'll shake your head. You'll find things that you relate to, but how he was able to bounce back and become who he, one of the greatest drummers in the world again, from someone who had just been beaten down by life, is pretty remarkable. And I think a lot of his lyrics, like we've said, in the second act of their career, are necessarily, how could they not be affected by his experiences? But there's still a lot of optimism in them.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to point out also, we've hit every song on this album, which is great.
We always do.
Until Peter said the main monkey business. That was the last one. When he said that, I'm like, that's all of them. And also,
did we hit
well, yeah, Bill talked about it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Part
Good.
of the transition between.
Yeah. I love the story behind how the main monkey business got
I love
its
the fact
title.
that was just Alec, dude.
But so Geddy's mother inspired the main monkey business, and the story, for those that don't know, she was talking to Geddy about a relative of theirs that had a reputation for being up to no good, and she said, "I expect he's up to some monkey business." And Geddy said, "What kind of monkey business?" She said, "Oh, the main monkey business." And he just thought it was so funny that he said, "That's what we got to call this song."
Yeah.
One of the things about the instrumentals from the later period is that, all through Rush's career after YYZ, as a Rush fan, I would hear a Rush instrumental and I would think, oh, this is really good. It's not as good as YYZ, but it's really good. And now as an older person, I think I was out of my mind. I mean, I think pretty much all of the Rush instrumentals are as good as YYZ. But for whatever reason, when they were coming out, I don't know whether it was like I took them for granted because I knew they were going to keep doing them. But that one that's on Roll the Bones is like my favorite now.
Yeah.
But at the time I was just like, that's pretty good. It's not as good as YYZ. And now I wonder what was wrong with me.
Well, the instrumentals on this album are exceptionally strong.
Yeah.
And we get three.
Yeah.
Tick, tick, tick.
There was
go on.
I don't know if you guys were involved in any Rush message boards, say back in this era. I was all over the place on these message boards, and I remember all the general online fandom commentary. It seemed like it was a very popular view that Far Cry and the instrumentals were the only worthy songs on the album.
Really?
And the rest didn't stack up.
Yeah, I feel like I remember that a little bit too. Yeah.
And that always blew my mind. I never quite grasped.
What was the general consensus why that was the only ones that were chosen, Bill? Did you get a feel for why they were going down that path?
From the best I can remember, there was a lot of just general carryover. People that were still upset about Vapor Trails and the sound of Vapor Trails, and they didn't necessarily feel like Rush was progressing musically.
Yeah, there were way too many fans that got way too upset about Vapor Trails. I remember that really well.
I was so happy they were back.
Yes,
because I never thought we'd ever get new Rush music.
Well, what I remember, and even in Australia, was that they may have never get back together again.
Yeah.
And there was conjecture that was it. They were done. So
I remember that around the time that Victor came out, that people were saying, well, this is the kind of stuff you're probably going to get because they're probably never going to get back together.
Absolutely. And to get Vapor Trails, it was like, hallelujah. We've got an album. But what I wanted to say about this album was I think this pushed the, the critical reappraisal of Rush. You had the documentary coming out the following year, and then you had all these famous rock stars and film stars like they were in a movie. Then you had people like Dave Grohl name dropping them, and it seemed like the public perception of Rush went from geek to cool.
People in sitcoms were like wearing the T-shirts and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there was a new appreciation. And also the band themselves, because if you guys ever saw the Snakes and Arrows live, they really believed in this album. I mean, I don't have it right in front of me, but they played a large chunk of this album on that tour. And it's the first time they've done that in a long, long time. Like starting with I would say maybe starting with Moving Pictures, definitely Signals. For the next few tours, they were heavy on pushing at least half, usually over half of the new album on that particular tour. And they'd stop doing that after a certain point. They'd play 3-4 songs, but I'm not sure. But there's 13 tracks on this album, and I think if you were to look at the Snakes and Arrows live DVD, I think they do 8 or 9 of them.
Yeah,
which is pretty good percentage of the new album, and mixing in plenty of other, classic songs too. But it was probably one of the last times that ever happened. I mean, granted, there was only one more new album after that, and they did do a big chunk of that, but it kind of needed to be done. But as far as a collection of songs, they rightfully so. They worked hard at this album, and as far as like some fans just complain for the sake of it. I've never really understood that. I mean, no, you're not going to like every single thing that comes up. You should just be glad they're still around, still putting out new albums. I mean, I know a lot of people that, we could talk about this at a later time. A lot of people hated the fact that they did a covers EP. I was just so glad there was new Rush music out. And it's like, you know what? They've written and composed and arranged some of the most amazing music ever. Why can't they let their hair down, so to speak, and just do a bunch of songs that they like without really thinking too much of it? Just have fun. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But this definitely kickstarted the late part of their career. Definitely there was critical reappraisal. They got new fans, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, blah, 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 blah. Love that speech. That just that's like all those years that they got ignored, and here we are. So I think that really summed it up.
I don't know exactly when this was, but does anybody remember when Rush was on the Colbert Report with Stephen Colbert?
I think that was like 2000 and I'll get this wrong. Someone out there is going to be like, "Oh, it wasn't that year."
Right. I almost didn't mention it for that reason because I don't remember when it was.
I think it was because on Beyond the Lighted Stage, I think Colbert himself says the first time you've been on American television in 33 years.
That's
so that
stunning.
Would put it at 2008 because they would have been on like Don Kirshner's rock concert in 1975. Yeah, they were never an MTV. Is that
really
band.
True? Is that really true? They've never been on a. I can't believe that.
They've been on plenty of, like, I've seen Neil on Canadian talk shows, and I've seen lots of, I've seen Getty interviewed on, like I said, Canadian television. And Getty's always said, like, our biggest profile has always been in Canada. It's probably the only country where they're considered to be a mainstream act. In the States, they're certainly, sold millions and millions of albums, but they've never, I don't think you hear Rush as regularly as you do up here. What can I say? We're proud of them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and one thing that I think it's worthy of noting is that they were never on Saturday Night Live.
That's right. I had read that
contemporaries were.
Yeah, I had read that they almost did SNL in like 94.
Really?
Now, why they didn't, I don't know. I know that Getty's always said he always felt that bands rarely sound good performing on TV because
he's right.
You're not using your own equipment, and there's time constraints, and there's this and that. Lots of great acts have appeared musically on SNL, but I just can't picture it because bands would typically, they'd come out and do their new single, and then at the end they do an older song. I can't picture Rush coming on in say 2007. Ladies and gentlemen, Rush, and they do Far Cry, and then at the end of the show they do Tom Sawyer. I can't picture that.
Right.
Would I have liked it? Yes.
It's like they're above it. I mean, when you think about it, it's like they're above it. It's like
not really what you'd call snobbish about it either. They just kind of quietly resist. They just kind of, we do our own thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what I wanted to say about that Colbert performance was it's pure joy. It's absolutely joyous. The interview is hilarious. The performance is great. The little things that Colbert does while they're playing is great. And it was off of YouTube for a very long time. And it just recently showed up again. But I
love
absolutely love
the
it.
question that he asked them. I said, you guys were known for having really long songs. Did you ever write a song that was so long that by the end of it, you were being influenced by yourselves? Because it happened so much earlier in your career.
Getting back to this album, Geddy did say, in his view, this is top 3. What do you guys think?
It's good. It's for a latter day album from a band of their vintage that's been putting out so many albums. And what more did they have to prove? I don't think they ever phoned in an album. And I think I've listened to this album, The Clockwork Angels, so much more since Neil died, because this is as new Rush music as we're ever going to get. And I want to appreciate every nuance and have them ingrained in my head as much as the older albums are, where I practically don't even need to put them on again. I can just listen to them because they're in here.
Bill, we know your views. What about you, Todd? What do you think? Top 3?
I would definitely not put it top 3, but hearing Geddy say that makes me want to work harder to get it into top 3 because I respect that opinion. So and he would know.
I think it could be possibly top 5, but it's shifting. And just listening to the last week or two, I've really grown to appreciate it even more. Just that it's got depth. Not that a Rush album doesn't have depth, but it is deep.
Right.
Really, really deep.
Right.
So
I wanted to mention too that I like Hugh Sims' original cover better. It's not as unique as the cover they chose, but it feels more like a Rush album.
Well, you know what? I think that slightly looks like a Pearl Jam album cover. They had a couple of Pearl.
It's almost a little bit derivative and not totally unique. So I think that they made the right call, but it does feel a little bit more Rushy to me.
But if you notice when Hugh does his galleries, that's the cover he uses, not the cover that became the front cover. And I also love the artwork that Hugh did for each song. Each one of those could have been its own album cover. They're all really striking and really, really great.
Yeah.
And they each fit the lyrics perfectly.
Absolutely.
Now, Far Cry with the lightning striking the baby carriage.
Well, that's a good segue, because I did say that we'd have a quick chat about the videos. So any comments that you want to throw about the video? I like the video for Far Cry, how it goes, sort of reminisces about the early Rush. And I love the imagery of the lightning and the pram. Any sort of comments?
I didn't go back and watch the videos, and I should have, because I don't remember them that well, but now I'm going to.
Yeah.
I definitely remember the concert, but not the videos.
Any sort of reminiscing from the concerts? Anything that you guys want to throw from that particular tour? Memories?
Tim was talking about all the songs they played from this album, and I thought it was great. I loved hearing all these new songs. The main complaint I heard at the time, and I definitely sensed this in the St. Louis audience where I saw them, they had too many in a row from Snakes and Arrows, and I think the audience got restless because they didn't break them up more. To me, I thought it was great, but at a typical concert, there's going to be many casual fans, and why are they not playing Limelight? Why are they not playing Spirit of Radio? And so other than that, though, I thought it was absolutely outstanding concert.
I unfortunately missed this tour. I think I've seen Rush 9 or 10 times, but I missed this one. I saw Time Machine later.
Yeah.
This concert was, I think, kind of like the album. I think it was the last time that I saw them live prior to Geddy really. The Time Machine tour, the wear in his voice was noticeable.
Yeah, I agree.
It never really got better. So still great, but yeah.
Bill, with the tour in St. Louis, did you notice, did they just do all the songs in the row in the middle? Would they sort of start with some of their older tracks, and then it would be in the middle, and then they would finish? Is that how it was structured?
Yeah, to the best of my recollection, it was all one big chunk in the middle with a couple of outliers. But for the most part, though, it was snakes, more snakes, and the audience.
Right.
So I've got the DVD here if you guys want me to read the track listing on it, because I would imagine it was probably pretty much the same all the way through the tour. So it went Lime, and they dug out some chestnuts here too. Limelight, Digital Man, that would have been awesome. Entre Nous, Mission, Free Will, The Main Monkey Business, The Larger Bowl, Secret Touch, Circumstances, Between the Wheels, Dreamline. Here's a big chunk. Far Cry, Working the Angels, Armor and Sword, Spindrift, The Way the Wind Blows, Subdivisions, Natural Science, Witch Hunt, Malignant Narcissism, Der Slag Worker, which is Neil's drum solo, Hope, Distant Early Warning, Spirit Radio, Tom Sawyer, and then the encore was One Little Victory, Passes to Bangkok, and YYZ. That's a long set. I mean, to complain about a bunch of songs in a row, you still got all the classics that you could. About the only like Rush staple I see here that they didn't do is they didn't do Closer to the Heart on this tour. But other than that, they hit. Like what was missing? You know,
and that clocks in at about 2 hours 30. Would it be, Tim? 2 hours 10,
probably,
2:20.
yeah.
And you think a lot of acts of that vintage would only do 90 minutes. I'm thinking of their counterparts, but Rush. 2 hours, 2.5 hours. That's great.
Yeah, they were making their tours longer, not shorter, which probably contributed to Getty, and they were going out like almost every year. So it's too much. They weren't resting enough. But, and that's why as sad as it was when they stopped performing, even before we knew about Neil, it was probably, I'm going to get hate for saying this. I love Rush, but it was probably time.
I was feeling the same thing.
Yeah. Well, a lot of bands don't know when it's time, unfortunately. And
some wear makeup, some don't. I love them too. Them too.
This guy said it, not me.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. All right, guys, that was fantastic. Another deep dive into a great Rush album. Let's do this again. I think that every time we do this, it's just so rich and rewarding. You find out things that, you didn't sort of know when you first listened to the album. This is a great album. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Put your comments. Tell us what you think of this album. And please check out the various channels that these guys are on. They're great channels, lots of great content. And we'll do this soon. Cheers.